Marin Fire History proudly presents Families in Fire, the story of the generations of fire service personnel in Marin County.
Well, good morning. This is retired Fire Chief Paul Smith, and today we're at the Kentfield Fire Station on this beautiful March morning. And this is Marin Fire History's episodes of Families in Fire. And today we have a special treat for our viewers. I'd like to introduce you to two firefighters, a mother and a daughter. Sherry worked here at Kentfield as a volunteer in the 1970s and 80s, and we'll talk to Sherry. And Jesse was recently hired by Southern Marin Fire District after starting with Marin County Fire. So we'll talk with the ladies today, and we'll introduce you to this episode of Families in Fire. So thank you very much. And good morning, Sherry.
Hi, Paul.
Good morning, Jesse.
Hi, good morning.
Well, thanks for meeting with us today. And Sherry, if we could start with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you got started as a volunteer back in the day?
All right. Well, I was born and raised in Ohio. I didn't have any firefighters really in my family, but I always liked the adventure. I liked, in college, I took computer programming and math, and at the time, those were very much male-oriented occupations, and so most of my classes I was used to being with a bunch of guys. But I moved out to California, and at the time, in the 70s, I was working as a waitress in a local establishment and got to meet some of the firefighters.
Okay.
And I was living in Kentfield at the time, so somehow the topic came up that Kentfield had a volunteer fire department, and I did not know that, and I got really excited and thought that's something that I've always wanted to do. And so I came to one of the monthly meetings upstairs, and I was voted in 6-month probation to be a firefighter, and so that was basically how I got started. And
wow.
Yeah.
And what year was this, Sherry?
I think it was around 1978.
Okay. All right. And you were a volunteer firefighter here.
Yes.
What did your training kind of consist of?
Well, the training, it was all on-the-job training, and mostly we went to drills. We had the ladder drills over at Marin Catholic on Tuesday nights, and the drills were an hour and a half every week. And that's basically how I got most of my training. We would do sporadically Saturday afternoon drills where we'd go up to the Marin lakes and pump water. And beside the ladder drills, we did a lot of laying hose and making the hydrants. And
so we've had this conversation, you and I have had this conversation, and to the best of my knowledge, you were one of the first female firefighters in the county, right?
I think so. I didn't know any other women firefighters at the time when I was here.
Okay, all right. And how was that coming into, you were the only woman here, and there were probably 30 volunteers and paid staff, and they were all guys.
They were, and at that first meeting when I got voted in, I did see, people making looks to each other like, oh, it's a woman that's here. But, once I got in, I felt like I had to prove myself, and so I worked really hard. I came to every drill. I made it to every one, the Saturday ones and every Tuesday. And when the plectrons went off, we had the tones, and when the tone went off, I had that, in my bedroom at my house, which was just, very close, right down the street.
Okay.
And I had my turnouts next to the bed, and I would jump in them and come to every call. And I was so close that a lot of times I was one of the first ones here.
Okay.
So got to make it to a couple, fires being the first one in.
And looking back for me, I don't think that experience was a lot different than mine, because when I came in, I wanted to work hard and be accepted by the group, because I didn't really know anybody either. But for a woman coming in 1970 whatever, I've got to say, because I was here then, you acclimated really well. You fit in so well. I mean, it was a pleasure for us, for firefighters, to have you come aboard, because there was no friction, and well, we hope, we treated you right and treated you well and made you part of the group. So I'm glad to hear from you that was a positive experience for you.
I felt very accepted, all the way from Chief Camp, who made me feel welcome, Assistant Chief Mariani, Bill Morris, who we called Tiki,
Right.
just took me under his wing and just said, like he guided me in everything I needed to know.
Yeah.
But all of the paid firefighters and all of the volunteers were so supportive and welcoming of me, and they all treated me just like an equal. I never felt awkward or out of place being a woman here.
Yeah.
It was
And
wonderful.
I think, that speaks well of the organization and the leadership at the time. Because I was a volunteer here then too, and how do you respond to somebody who you haven't met before? And I think we treated you just like we treat another rookie, and everybody got along really well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
And then here we are, we're moving to the 2000s, and we have sitting across the table from your daughter Jessie here, and here's Jessie looking at her mom. Did you guys talk about her experience down here before you got involved with the fire service? Or how was that? Did she influence you at all? Or what was the story there, Jessie?
Yeah, so, growing up, we always knew that mom was a firefighter, which was always like, wow, that's cool. Your mom, not your dad? Your mom was a firefighter? She always spoke so highly of it, and she even to this day says the best times of her life were at the fire department, And so growing up, when I was a kid, she was no longer a firefighter. She had already moved on, and she was a teacher at the time. But we always knew that she was, and that's what she loved, and she talked about it all the time, So I grew up always knowing that if I want to be a firefighter, I can be a firefighter.
Yeah.
Like so many girls, I grew up in the 80s. So many girls in the 80s grew up thinking, oh, that's not for me. I'm not a boy, And that's not how I grew up at all. I knew it was an option. Not that I didn't grow up saying I want to be a firefighter, but I always knew it was an option,
Sure.
There's no closed doors.
Yeah, mom blazed the trail a little bit. Huh?
100%, yep.
Yeah, opened the door and let you know anything was possible.
Exactly.
So a little bit about you, Jessie. You grew up in Petaluma, and when did you make that decision? Hey, I'm going to give this firefighting thing a go.
So actually 2 times in my life. The first time was right out of high school.
All right.
I graduated high school. I started at Santa Rosa Junior College. Took a couple fire classes. I took the Intro to Fire. I took my EMT classes, got my EMT certificate.
Okay.
And this was right out of high school. And then at that time, just life took me in another direction.
Sure.
I had a part-time job that turned into a career and put the fire stuff on the back burner for a little bit. Ended up getting married, having a family. And then working part-time, raising my kids, it started nagging on me really that I needed to do something that I wanted to do, not just work part-time and raise a family, which was great, but it wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't what I was meant to do,
Sure.
and what I always wanted to do. So it took me until my mid-30s when I said, you know what, my kids are in school now, I can focus on myself now,
Okay.
and I had to think about it for a second and say, what do I want? What do I want to do? And it kept nagging on me, well, fire is what I've always wanted to do, And it actually kind of took a discussion between me and my husband where he was like, I kept saying, well, I'm getting kind of old for this, I'm getting kind of old. And he looked at me and he goes, if you keep saying it, you're going to get even older.
Right.
Quit your job, go to the fire academy. And it was kind of like
Really?
that I needed to just hear it. I want to do it, I want to do it. And I needed just kind of that, stop talking about it, go do it,
So you had total support at home.
100%. Yeah, nothing
Oh,
but support.
that's great.
Yeah, every step of the way, for sure. And
That's
so, it was early 2020. And this was before the pandemic hit. And that's when I decided, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go and kind of see what happens.
Sure.
And so I started, I took the pre-academy class. Now you have to take a fitness class to make sure that you're physically fit enough to go into the academy. So I took that class, and right the last weekend of that class is when the pandemic hit. Everything shut down. But the great part is the fire academy did not shut down. So we were the only ones, and fire and police were the only ones that got to keep going to campus. And so I got to go to the academy.
Because the academy in Windsor it's not with other students taking liberal arts, English and art and all that. It's just
Public safety.
Public safety, Fire Science Academy.
Yep.
Right.
So it was just fire academy, police academy, and they realized that they couldn't shut those down. They still needed firefighters. They still needed police. So they let us a lot of restrictions and a lot of interesting pandemic things, but we made it happen. And
What was your first engine company experience? I think that's what I'm asking.
okay, so after I graduated the academy, I was never a volunteer anywhere before that.
Okay.
But after I graduated, the last week we had different departments come and talk about their department, and that's when I heard about Marin County's seasonal program. And so right afterwards, I think about a month or two after graduation, they were accepting applications for the seasonal program. And you had to apply the second the application opened, because they took just a couple, I think maybe 200 applications and closed it. So by midday, the day that application opened, they were full. So luckily I did it early. I was one of those 200.
Wow.
Luckily I took them seriously when they said apply early.
Yeah.
And I got to start working with Marin County.
And where were you stationed? 1 year, 2 years?
2 years.
2 years
So
accounting.
my
okay.
first year I was stationed at Woodacre.
Engine company.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was on the engine at Woodacre.
Okay.
And then second year I was out at Tamales.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you go to? We had a couple of decent fires back in 2021. Did you get out of county at all?
So 21 was the Dixie Fire, which we basically spent the entire summer out of county. I got to go to the Dixie Fire twice because every 2 weeks we would rotate the crew out. So I went on Marin County's second tour out. I spent 2 weeks out there, came home for maybe 4 weeks, and then I went out again on our OES for my second tour at the Dixie. So I got to actually go. My first tour, it was a 1 million acre fire, biggest fire in California, I think still, to this point.
Sure.
So first we were, it was a little bit small. We were at the southern end. The second time I went, I was at the northern end. It had blown up. It was already almost 1 million acres.
It was crazy.
It looked like a totally different fire. I didn't even know. I thought we were going to get there. Oh yeah, I know where this is. I know these roads. Nope, we were miles away from the first time because it was just so huge. But I got two very different experiences, one on a Type 3 with county, and then the other on the OES Type 1, which was very at the end, but they were all mopping it up.
So for a new firefighter that just basically came out of the academy, you had some great experience for that first season with Marin County. I understand you just got picked up with
Southern Marin Fire District.
And when do you start there, or have you already started?
At the end of this month, our academy starts. So I've got a couple more weeks, and then we'll start the academy, 12-week academy.
Cool. And you're excited?
So excited, yeah. And a lot of the guys I've been seasonals with for the past 2 years. So out of the 30, I'm probably good friends with 25 of them, which is great, yeah.
I know, it really is.
Fantastic.
Now, Sherry, we've been listening to Jessie talk for a couple of minutes about her experience and her fires in the Dixie Fire and that. Maybe you'd like to relate to us a little bit about some of the interesting incidents you were on when you were a firefighter.
Well, right now I'm living vicariously through her, and it's bringing back wonderful memories. I got to go on one OES run, and it was a wonderful experience. I was a volunteer, and we got to do everything that the regular paid guys did, and I was one of the drivers, and we went down to San Bernardino to the Panorama Fire.
Okay.
And we were there over Thanksgiving in 1980. We didn't have a turkey dinner, we had a steak dinner, so that was really nice. But it was just a great experience. Just one of the things that still gives me goosebumps is just when you're, driving and there's a dozen fire trucks in the caravan, and the people are standing on the sides of the roads with, signs that say, "Thank you, firefighters." It just gave me such a wonderful feeling knowing that I was going and being of service to the community. It's just such a wonderful feeling. So that OES run was like one of the highlights of my firefighting. But the other incident that always comes to mind when I think of the memorable incidents is a structure fire that we had right near the station. It was around the corner on Stinson. And I lived just, down the street, so I was one of the first here at the fire station.
Oh, to staff the rig.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. So I got here, I was one of the first ones, and I jumped on the back of the truck and went over to the fire and pulled up the hill, and it was just fully engulfed home on fire. And got out, so I was one of the first ones into the fire. And we put our masks on and went in, and crawling in through the heavy smoke. And as I got in, something on my gear, I think my hose or one of the straps got caught on some furniture. So as I'm going in, I had to kind of back up and try to undo it. Well, one of the captains was behind me, and he thought that it was my first fire, and he thought I didn't want to go in, and he's pushing me forward, and I'm trying to back up just so I could get unhooked from it. And so it wasn't until after the fire was over that I explained I wasn't scared. I was just trying.
He's like,
I just couldn't get in, and he's pushing me, and I'm trying to back up. But I went in and got one of the first ones in. We got a lot of backup that came quickly after that. So I came out of the fire, and the assistant chief, Marianne, sent me down to the truck to get some equipment after I went out. And on my way down, there were stairs, and I'm running down the stairs, not knowing there was a swimming pool at the bottom of the stairs. And at the bottom of the stairs, splash right in the pool. And so
It must have been nighttime.
it was
Right, yeah.
pitch black, middle of the night. Went into the pool, came out, got the equipment that he needed, and came back up like squishing, and just took a lot of ribbing after that. I got the nickname of Water Wings, and so I figured I've now got a nickname, so I'm one of the guys. I earned a nickname.
Yeah. Jesse, you listen to your mom. We listened to you a little bit. What do you think are some differences between her training and experience in the fire service and what you did to start your career?
I mean, a little bit before this, we were kind of talking about just like her process of getting into the fire service. It was somebody like, hey, you should be a firefighter. And she went to a meeting and said, I'd like to be a firefighter,
Yeah.
A little bit different now. It's definitely, it's, more schooling and just a little bit more rigid, I would say, is, the classes you have to take and the certifications you have to have. Especially for, most paid departments, you've got to have a firefighter 1 and maybe even a firefighter 2 now, some of the places. You have to be an EMT if you're lucky, or a paramedic. Most places will only take you as a paramedic, So a lot different now as far as the schooling and the training that you need before they'll even let you on an engine.
Right.
I just actually didn't know that. For the first time I heard that you said you drove the OES down to San Bernardino, and there's no way they would let us drive a fire engine right now without a Class B license or an endorsement or something,
Right.
This last off season, I actually spent the entire off season getting my Class B license, and it's a process.
It's a process.
It's a process. It was not easy to do.
Yep.
So, a little different than just, jump in the driver's seat and
Go
head
down
down, a lot more, I guess, legal, hoops to jump through and stuff like
Sure.
that. So just as far as I think the schooling and the certificates and things like that. But I mean, I was fortunate enough that when I made that decision to do it, doors really just started opening for me. Not saying that I didn't work hard for it by any means, but I got in, I applied for the fire academy and I got in right away, which I was not expecting. And then I, applied early for my job at county, and I interviewed well and I got the job. So doors started opening as I started working hard for it.
Sure.
So I know a conversation I had with one of my coworkers the other day. He said, from the time you decided to be a firefighter until you got that offer as a full-time position, how long did it take you? And for me, it's been just under 3 years. And I'm really lucky to say that, because a lot of guys say 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. There's some people have had a much longer journey.
Depends.
So I'm very fortunate to say that, I've worked my butt off for it, but it's taken
Here
3
you are.
years, and here I am,
Here you
and
are, yeah.
just got an offer for a full-time position.
That's
so.
right.
yeah, I'm lucky to be able to say that. But definitely a different process than it was, I think, back in the 70s.
And I've got to say, you had a really good, if you will, mentorship or apprenticeship with Marin County Fire as a seasonal.
Oh, phenomenal, yeah.
So, you took advantage of the opportunities that your mom did as a volunteer to try to figure out, okay, when you were a seasonal at Marin County Fire, you could have made a decision after the Dixie Fire. Yeah, I don't want to do this because I don't want to be away from home for the weeks at a time, whatever. You got to experience that and said, I'm in. This is for me. I love this.
Yep. And I'm sure that's not for everybody. Not everybody can do this for sure.
No.
But for the people who decide they love it, they're all in. I mean, it's an experience that you can't get in any other profession.
Right.
It's amazing. Sometimes there seriously were days where we would, even just in training or whatever, kind of, we would all look around and go, they're paying us for this. Like, this is amazing. Nobody gets this experience, and they're actually paying us for this.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I mean, it's an experience that unless you do it, you can't explain it.
No, I agree.
I was going to add that one of the other big differences that I can think of is some of the safety protocol. That when I would come to jump on the truck, we didn't sit in the front of the truck. We jumped on the back and hung on, and usually didn't even put a strap on. We just hung on and standing on the back of the truck and going to fires. I even remember going to a couple, they were called grass fires in those days, grass fires, and having to go up the highway, and on the highway hanging on the back of the truck without any safety straps or anything. So it was totally different than what they're allowed to do now. Sure. Yeah, I mean, I could tell when I was riding on the back that it wasn't safe, but it was really fun. Yeah. We also had the plectrons that would go off at night, but that was being a volunteer.
That's how we called off duty.
Yeah.
And we've done a section on Marin fire history with the horns on the roof, and every town in Marin had a horn or some sort of emergency call volunteer system, if it was a siren or a horn or whatever it was,
Yeah.
And because that was the technology. And then we went to pagers, to plectrons, and then we went to pagers.
And now we all have cell phones with telephone command on it.
Yeah.
And some of the other things that that I remember doing that I don't think that they do too much anymore is some of the community, we would have musters with some of the other departments where we would just
Have
competitions. One fire department it would be Kentfield against Larkspur and Corte Madera, and we would do different, tug of war and hose battles,
hose poles and stuff. Yeah. And those Larkspur musters, Larkspur, I think, sponsored them all down at Redwood High School.
I remember them also at Corte Madera Park.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were hose pole contests and bucket brigades.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And there were 2 or 3 or 4 things that, hose competition of some sort with the...
Something else that I wanted to mention about, and I don't know where it fits in with the questions, but when...
let's just go for it.
I wanted to mention how Jessie was exposed to the fire department when she was 1 day old. She was born at Marin General, and the people who were on duty at Kentfield and Larkspur came to visit, and passing her around and holding her, and this was in 1984 when she was born.
So you were indoctrinated at 1 year.
When she was 1 day old.
1 day old. I had no choice.
And that's one of the things, the camaraderie and the closeness of the guys was just something that really stuck with me. Just even, all these years later, I have such a warm spot in my heart for Kentfield and the guys that I worked with all the way up from the chief down to all the volunteers, was how close we got. And I even still stayed friends after I left with Bill
Morris.
Tiki, we called him, and Dogman, Mariani, that I still stayed in touch with them for years after I left the fire service.
Yeah, and then she's just embarking on her journey with this. And I think I mentioned this to you before, Jesse, is I think, my opinion is you are going to work for a really good organization, a really good top-notch organization. And what I see, what I know from Southern Marin is, you know, if I had to make a recommendation on where to work, they'd be right at the top of my list. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Shout
Yep.
out to you.
Yep.
That's great.
I hear that from every single person. Nobody says a bad word about that.
Yep.
And I'm very proud of her. And like I said before, I'm living vicariously through her. And when she comes back from any of the fires or any calls, I just pump her for information. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. I'd like to thank our guest today, Sherry Fink, and daughter Jesse Riboli. And we appreciate the sponsorship of the Marin County Fire Chiefs for our Marin Fire History episode on Families in Fire.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
taking
you
the
very
time
much.
to talk to us today.
So fun. So fun.